What is it? What are sanctions? What do they represent? I see your T-shirt there on Zimbabweans uniting against war on sanctions. You even call it war on sanctions. Take us through, say, what does that mean?
I think it's very important for us to say, as you were saying, that African youths are tired of colonialism. I actually think it's the opposite. African youths are not aware of colonialism because of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda that is taking place on the African continent that makes the African youths believe that their leaders are the problem instead of neocolonialism, imperialism, or the recolonization that is currently taking place on the African continent. And that happens by misinforming people, disinforming people, creating illusions for people to believe that what they see is caused by a cause that is usually black leadership and incompetence of black people, which was created in the colonial era. And sanctions are part and parcel of a device, a tool used by the imperialists to continue to ingrain the negative sentiment, the self-hate, and this infighting and disunity among Africans by attacking their economies silently with a virus, with a disease of economics that then cripples an economy, makes people feel despondent about their nation, makes people hate their leadership, and makes people believe that their leadership is not adequate and must be removed, and automatically causes infighting that allows the West to come in and intervene and take over a country.
What is the impact of sanctions on the common people?
The impact of sanctions are multifaceted. Because they attack the engine of the economy, which is the human mind. They influence the human mind to feel despondent by the sick scenarios because you can't get food, you can't get access to certain things. It then begins to affect the economy itself, where people become self-centered, they become selfish, they are not united, they are not collective in saving, collective in investment, collective in building their nation, and collective in defending their nation, that their nation is vulnerable to collapse. And all that is started by closing certain taps of the economy, by imposing sanctions and prohibitions on people's ability to trade with the rest of the world.
What is the purpose? What is the purpose of a sanction?
The purpose of
a country on sanction. Whoever is, I'll ask the third question. Maybe answer both of them. Who imposes sanctions on another country, and what is the main objective?
The people that impose sanctions on a nation are usually nations that have economic power. And the nations that have got economic power in our world are nations that have been created by the exploitation of people's labor, colonialism, slavery, that built them the power that they have. Then they created an illusion of democracy, and they still now are exploiting nations by the use of force, military might, and sanctions to force those that they send sanctions upon to reform their economies to the favor of these previous colonizers and enslavers. So it's to continue slavery under a system that seems democratic that these sanction senders send sanctions upon nations. So in Zimbabwe, they've put sanctions upon Zimbabweans because the Zimbabwean people had the audacity to try and control their resources, take them away from Western corporations, take their land from Western corporations, take their land from European settlers, and put those resources at the disposal of the Zimbabwean people to enable the Zimbabwean people to grow their economies. But the West doesn't want that, because America grew to be more powerful than the British, who were colonizing them, because they began to control the gold, the land, and the resources of the Indian territory that we call America today, and they used that might to overthrow imperialism or British imperialism in America. They know that Africa has the opportunity to do the same, take control of its resources, begin to use those resources to create industrial goods, to sophisticate them, deprive Europe of those resources, and with that power...
If you're not depriving them, put them at the right price.
And that is exactly why Zimbabwe was put under sanctions. Robert Mugabe had the audacity to first of all defeat Europeans in war. After defeating the Europeans in war, then deciding to educate his people. Even though he wasn't given reparations, even though colonial debt was put on Zimbabwe, he still somehow, by utilizing the unity of the people, got food for work program for people to build schools, to build roads, to build clinics, and to actually create a country out of nothing, then educate the people, make sure those people had longer lives by reducing the infant mortality from 200 people per thousand to less than 40 per thousand, and that then created a superpower in human mind, human capital, skill, that started transforming an economy that had the second best stock exchange in the world in Africa and one of the best performing stock exchanges in Africa. They started transforming that economy and that stock exchange and those companies into black ownership through indigenization.
What went wrong? Zimbabwe now does not even have money.
Nothing.
What went wrong?
Nothing went wrong.
Take me through, Chief. Take me through.
Nothing went wrong because...
We're economic refugees here.
Right. We're economic refugees because of the way we've been socialized to think. We've been made to believe that the economy of Zimbabwe is doomed because the white man is gone and because we don't have debt from the IMF anymore. I myself, when the economy crashed, my parents said, you need to look for a plan. And the South African company offered me an opportunity. I took it. But that was lack of knowledge. Because what it is that the European came for in Africa was not paper money. They left paper money in Europe. They came for the gold. They came for the platinum. They came for the land. And they came for our labor. We have those factors still in Zimbabwe today, but we are not utilizing them. And the Zimbabwean government has created policies in which an ordinary Zimbabwean can have a claim for gold, can have a claim for chrome, can have a claim for any resource except for diamonds and platinum. And instead of us utilizing those things, utilizing our own labor, because we're educated to think that I need a job from a white man to earn paper money, while he is the one who controls the gold, who controls the land, and uses my labor, we are missing an opportunity. And by the time I started recognizing this, it took me 15 years to understand that the wealth of Zimbabwe is in Zimbabwe now. The gold, the land, the chrome, it's accessible to me now. But now, because I've created a life elsewhere, it's not easy to relocate because I didn't create the connections, the social capital within the Zimbabwean system. It's no longer just easy for me to go there because there's already an established ecosystem in which I'm not included because I was outside. So I now need to build bridges.
I want to punch some few holes. If you had an opportunity of saying a statement to Donald Trump in one sentence.
Well, Donald Trump is perpetuating a crime.
You're talking to Donald Trump.
Yes. Donald Trump, you are perpetuating a crime against humanity through the collective punishment of 17 million Zimbabweans through economic warfare that is illegal through the very same laws that were created by the United States when it created the UN Charter and created the Human Rights Declaration together with the institutions, the courts, and the multilateral institutions that says that all humanity shall be equal, no man shall oppress another, and decolonization shall be a thing of the past. So by instituting these sanctions, maintaining these sanctions, you are committing a crime against humanity, you're breaking international law, and you're dehumanizing the Zimbabwean people for Western and racial purposes.
Send a message to the Queen of London and the British government.
Same thing to the Queen of England.
No, say it.
The Queen of England is somebody that
No, talk to her.
The Queen of England, you are an immoral human being that created the colonial capitalist system that killed Africans and dehumanized Africans to take their resources for the enrichment of the British people by creating the impression that the British people were superior to Africans, bringing a corrupted system that has destroyed agriculture, polluted the land, destroyed lives, and has begun to create death not only for Africans, but the world at large. It is time that you denounce your system and begin to look at a humane way of developing the world by taking your cue from Africans that have been the biggest and oldest civilization.
One statement, Africa Union.
Africa Union, you need to stand up and take up your position. Africa is what is going to restore humanity. Africa is the hope of the world. Africa is what needs to take over, but it's not going to take over until you start taking leadership by denouncing Western death systems, Western death technologies, Western death ideologies, and starting to implement African ideologies which are supposed to lead humanity into evolution and sustainability of human life.
Johnson, Sanofi's pharmaceutical companies. One statement for them. What are you saying to them?
Close your doors. Close your doors. Because as long as you're producing immunity suppressing medicines, toxic chemicalized medicines, and you're using chemicals to remedy problems that have already been created by your chemicals, you're creating a death cycle. Close your doors.
What's the message to the young people of the nation of Africa?
Africa, you need to wake up.
Young people, talk to the young
Africa,
people.
young African people, you've got to wake up to understand that you've got the most valuable continent, and you are the most valuable resource on that continent as human labor. And the West needs